After finishing sketching outdoors, I barely had any strength left by the time I got home. I had reached my limit. Lately, my mental and physical fatigue had been accumulating. An unintended conversation I overheard between my parents struck me even harder. How about making Claire earn an additional $2,000 each month? I'm worried she might collapse from doing so much though. It's okay if she collapses. She's not related to us by blood after all. My mother laughed at that. I quietly retreated to my room, trying not to make a sound. It was the first time I learned this shocking truth. Am I not their real child? While it was hard to believe, it felt more convincing. The reason they were cold to me was because we weren't related by blood. Anger began to surge within me. My parents had been using me, dangling bits of affection as bait, without knowing how hard I had been working to earn money. I won't forgive them anymore. The moment I uttered those words, my resolution solidified. If they intended to do that, I had plans of my own. I would abandon all imposed love, family, and responsibilities. That night, I quietly left my family home while planning my future. My name is Claire, and I am currently 27 years old. It is said that a child's happiness depends on their parents. I remember reading an article online about this once. While I don't agree entirely, I do agree with that point. I grew up in a troubled family, feeling unhappy throughout my childhood. There are various types of parents in the world, some of whom suppress their children's individuality or use harsh discipline under the guise of upbringing. However, such sad events did not occur in my family. Both my father and mother were gentle, and there was no rough behavior. Being quiet myself, I was influenced by them, and the three of us lived peacefully day by day. When I started elementary school, our family situation changed dramatically. My father won a large sum of money in the lottery. I can't forget how my parents celebrated at that time. "Look, $200,000. I really won," my father exclaimed, and my mother responded, "I can't believe it. There are so many things I want." Large sums of money have the power to change people's personalities. My once gentle parents changed. I am sad about how just $200,000 could do this. My father quit his job, and my mother also suddenly retired from her part-time job. They started spending the lottery winnings recklessly, saying, "Claire, your dad and I are going out, so stay quiet," adding, "Listen to what the babysitter says. We'll be back in a week. You said that last time. Where are you going? It's not fair to go just the two of you. Take me with you." I protested, but they ignored me and went out to enjoy their meals and trips. My initial question, "Why am I being excluded?" lasted only for a while. Gradually, I began to ponder my parents' unstable behavior. In other families, the parents were properly employed, but I wondered if my family was okay. Years later, my concerns became a harsh reality. My parents quit all their jobs, indulged in luxury, and became accustomed to a lazy lifestyle, no longer resembling their former selves. I can't remember how long it took for them to spend the $200,000 they won in the lottery. It might have been when I was in the 4th or 5th grade. By that time, my parents had started drinking alcohol from the morning, and our home became a mess. Dishes piled up, and the house was covered in trash and dust. Neither my father nor my mother did any housework anymore, and we could no longer afford to call a house cleaning service. The room, overflowing with garbage, was filled with an unpleasant scent. In this environment, my often drunk parents frequently yelled at me, "Stop daydreaming and clean up." Or "You can do the cleaning yourself, can't you? Do you even have a purpose for being here?" They would say, making me question my own existence. Why am I here? This question has been in my heart since my childhood. While doing housework, I always thought about this. I wondered if children in other families were experiencing the same thing. Our family gradually started running out of food. No one in the family was working, and there was no income. Previously, we managed by selling household items, But eventually, that became impossible too. "Claire, come outside today." But I'm embarrassed to be in front of people." "Don't worry about it. No one is looking at you." Encouraged by my parents, I ventured into the streets at night. I wandered every corner of the downtown area, looking for edible leftovers. I felt like a stray dog. I was often scolded by store owners. It's a wonder I wasn't taken into protective custody by the police. When I returned home, my hungry parents greeted me, eagerly waiting for the plastic bag of leftovers I brought. "You're late. What were you dawdling for? Hurry up and give it here." "Is this all?" As I watched my parents devour the leftovers, tears streamed down my face. "Tomorrow, when I go to school lunch will be waiting for me." However, I could see that the other kids would make faces of disgust. It's because my clothes smelt of leftovers. The cold stares were unbearable, and it was hard to endure. One evening, as I went out again to look for leftovers, a fairly ordinary but memorable woman approached me. Someone in the neighborhood had contacted her to investigate our living conditions. "I'm Kathy, a social worker. Are your parents home? I need to speak with them." Ah, yes. That was the moment our lives began to change. Kathy spoke with my parents, and many of our problems started to resolve. My father obtained a job through vocational training, and my mother began working part-time again, significantly improving our home situation. With a stable income and welfare support, we were able to afford proper meals and new clothes. To me at that time, Kathy was truly a savior. "I'm often at the city office, so Claire, contact me anytime you need help," she said. "I really can't thank you enough." "Thank you, Kathy." However, my mother continued her days drowned in alcohol, and her repeated mistakes and tardiness at work eventually led her to quit. She did nothing but laze in front of the TV. Unable to say anything to my mother, I managed the household chores on my own and spent my time at home. I often went to the supermarket with the money my father gave me, buying instant food and bread to eat. "My women here are useless, big and small. What are you even doing here?" my father said. I wondered why I was here. Even as I moved into the upper grades of elementary school, that question persisted in my heart. I used to be very happy as a child, enjoying every day. While earning little, my father spent money on gambling, gradually accumulating debt. If this continued, I might return to the days of scavenging through trash bins. So, I sought Kathy's help many times. My family was one of the more troublesome cases Kathy had to follow. After starting middle school, I began working a part-time job. It was a morning newspaper delivery job. With that income, I was able to buy new stationery and shoes. Thinking back to that time, the issue with bras come to mind. My mother had never taught me the importance of wearing a bra, so for a long time I didn't wear one. After being pointed out by a classmate at school and being shocked, I remained hunched over for a long time. After school that day, I immediately called Kathy and went out with her to buy a new bra. Why are my parents so indifferent? They don't care what happens to me. They ignore me even though I'm embarrassed, I said. Parents are different, but don't worry, Claire, you're doing great, and I'll support you whenever you need help, Kathy answered. Kathy was always a reliable person. She invited me to her home to teach me cooking, imparting various life skills. Every time I felt Kathy's warmth, I wondered why my parents were so cold to me, why they couldn't be kinder. I often sighed, comparing my neglectful parents to Kathy, who, though technically a stranger, cared for me like her own. Throughout my high school life, the situation remained the same. I barely managed to sustain my life while keeping in touch with Kathy. It was only when it came to choosing my future path that my parents seriously started to think about me. Are you planning to leave home after graduating high school? Really? Claire, are you sure that's right? Leaving your mom and dad behind. They strongly opposed, and I couldn't leave home. My parents did everything they could to keep me, pleading fervently for me to stay. I took their words as a sign of their love and decided to stay at home as they asked. Drawing was my only hobby as I spent a lot of time at home. Using pencils and erasers on the backs of flyers and in my sketchbook, I created worlds of my own. A colleague from the printing company I worked for taught me how to sell my drawings. I was employed at a small local printing shop, assigned to the General Affairs Department. One day, a colleague appreciated my drawing, which led to its sale. On a whim, I listed a work from my room on an auction site, and it fetched a surprisingly high price. This is wonderful. Small yet priced so well. Buyers praised the warmth of the patterns, leaving comments. My work sold rapidly, and the earnings eventually equaled a month's salary. My attachment to my drawings deepened. Hearing this, my parents were the happiest. Claire has such talent in drawing. They rejoiced. Keep drawing and selling them. If you become popular, you can sell them for even higher prices. They began to support me with changing eyes. I updated my art supplies and produced works using both digital and analog methods. Through social media, I introduced my works to the world, gaining further popularity. I began to create pieces based on direct messages from fans, and I even received offers from corporations, like illustrating for a major fast food chain. My parents were thrilled when my work was used in a campaign for a big company. "Fantastic, Claire. We're so proud. We're so lucky to have such a wonderful daughter," they said. For the first time in my life, I felt acknowledged as a filial daughter. I left the management of money to my parents and focused on my creative activities. Their praise was the most valuable reward for me. At 22, pushed by my parents, I quit my job and chose to pursue the path of art. Whether called an illustrator or a painter, the title didn't matter much. Working as a freelancer required self-management, and I had to take care of my health every day. However, to meet deadlines, I couldn't afford to rest. Even in bed, I kept drawing. The hardest part was that I no longer received words of encouragement or gratitude from my parents. They had adapted to my stable income and quit their jobs again, returning to a lazy lifestyle. What are you spacing out for? Hurry up and draw, meet the expectations and fulfill your responsibilities. That's your job, isn't it? They scolded me. I'm sorry, I'm just a little tired. You think that's enough? The deadline is soon. The client is waiting. They pressured me, forcing me unwell to sit in front of the canvas. I began to feel exploited during that period. Every day, despite being exhausted, I continued to paint and complete my artworks. The paintings I once loved had become objects of disgust, and there were times when my hands trembled as I held the brush. Still, I occasionally found motivation in the words of praise from my parents and continued to persevere. Then one day, after finishing sketching outdoors, I barely had any strength left by the time I got home. I clearly felt at my limit. Both my mental and physical fatigue had accumulated. On my way to my room, I overheard a conversation between my parents. It seemed they had been drinking. They were enjoying themselves in the living room. How about making Claire earn an additional $2,000 each month? I'm worried she might collapse from doing so much though, they discussed. It's okay if she collapses. She's not related to us by blood after all. One of them said lightly with a laugh. Yes, let's use her up. My mother laughed at that. I quietly retreated to my room, trying not to make a sound. It was the first time I learned this shocking truth. Am I not their real child? While it was hard to believe, it felt more convincing. The reason they were cold to me was because we weren't related by blood. This feeling was hard to express in words. Anger surged through me to the point where my hand trembled holding the paintbrush. They had never understood the effort I put into my paintings. I won't forgive them anymore, I said out loud. At that moment, my resolution solidified. If that was their intention, I had my own plans. I decided to let go of all the imposed love, family, and responsibilities. That night, while planning for the future, I quietly left the house. The next day, While I was staying at a hotel, I noticed several calls from my mother. We needed to have a proper discussion on how to handle this. When I answered the call, my mother became emotional and raised her voice. "Claire, where are you? What do you mean by staying out without permission? Are you with someone? Why didn't you contact us?" She continued to reproach me. "I went to the city office to get a copy of the family register," I responded. Hearing that, my mother was at a loss for words. It seemed she was unsure how to start this conversation. Before leaving home, I had found important documents related to my birth. I found them while searching the house as my parents lay drunk in the living room. "Is it true that I was adopted?" I asked. "Yes, it's true. I'm sorry we never told you. When did you find out? How? Did you leave the house after finding out?" my mother asked. "No, the shock was part of it, but not the only reason. I was planning to leave for good this time. Tell Dad I won't be coming back," I responded. My mother suddenly became agitated and started questioning the reasons. It was too sudden for her to accept. "Talk to your father too. Let's all sit down as a family and talk. We can make a specific decision afterwards," she said. After some back and forth over the phone, we agreed to meet at a cafe. It was a small cafe inside a commercial facility, usually not very crowded. When I arrived at the agreed time, my parents were already there, waiting for me. They seemed angry. My sudden actions appeared unforgivable to them. "Claire, why did you leave on your own? Your mother and I were really worried," my father said. "Did you really mean to leave? Why did you decide that? You could have stayed with us," my mother said. "I'm sorry, but I can't stand it anymore. My intentions to leave are real. From now on, I will paint only for myself." I reaffirmed my decision. "How irresponsible!" my father exclaimed, his face turning red. I felt the anger as well. At that moment, I felt a strong anger towards my selfish parents. "Claire, why did you suddenly decide to leave the house? Please tell me," my mother said. "Because I heard you two talking while drunk. You were planning to make me earn an additional $2,000. I answered. That it was." My mother stumbled over her words. "Do you think it's okay to exploit me even if I get sick, because I'm not your real child?" I asked them. My parents turned pale. They had not expected that I had heard their conversation. They looked confused about how to explain. Listening to you two, I was shocked. Then, I looked into it and found out I was adopted. And I also found out why you took me in, I continued. My real parents were acquaintances from my father's hometown, unable to raise a child. That child was me. I was scheduled to be placed in a facility. At that time, my father had a debt of $30,000 to his real father. Taking in and raising an orphan would erase the debt, and my mother, who was newly married, agreed to take me in as family. Mom was unable to have children when she was young, so taking me in was convenient for you. I added, "That's true. There's no mistake. But it's also true that we love you like our own daughter. Love me as your own daughter? Don't lie? You only see value in me for labor, right? I am no longer the one to be deceived. It's clear that both my father and mother see me only as a means to generate income. I refuse to paint for such people any longer. I decided to reveal everything on this occasion. I decided to share my true feelings with my surprised parents. I started by speaking to my mother. I had been disappointed by her many times since I was a child. Mom, I've always felt embarrassed about something." "What are you talking about?" "The fact that you've always been drowning in alcohol. It made me the target of jokes among my friends, and it was really tough." My mother looked down in shame. It seemed she was aware of the shamefulness of her actions. Many people turn to alcohol dependence due to emotional weaknesses. My mother was probably one of them. Whenever a bit of leeway appeared in our lives, she immediately turned to alcohol. Heavy drinking became a habit, and eventually, her consumption increased. and she lost control. I always wished you would pull yourself together. I hated how even your face changed when you drank. Kathy, the social worker, was really worried about you too. Kathy? The same Kathy who used to come check on us a lot back then. That's right. I still keep in touch with her. My gratitude for Kathy is endless. If it weren't for her, I wonder what my life would have become. I might have imagined myself still picking up leftovers during my high school days. I also could not deny the possibility of earning money in unsavory ways. The apartment I'm living in now was actually secured through Kathy's recommendation. It was her consideration to ensure I could quickly secure my safety should any problems arise. Does the alcohol taste especially good when it's bought with the money your daughter earned? You must enjoy that taste every day. You barely do any housework and just wait for the weekend cleaning. That lifestyle might be permissible, Mom. You've had a lot of struggles since you were young because of problems with your womb. Does that excuse your current reckless lifestyle? Isn't that just indulgence? Honestly, I don't have many memories of you acting like a mother. Housework was always left to me. I was often forced to clean up after you when you were drunk. Yet you think such a selfish lifestyle is okay? Please keep the jokes to a moderate level. You don't even know how much I've struggled. As I glared strongly, my mother was visibly shaken. Hey, stop it. Don't blame your mother so much. Indeed. There's a need to blame you too, Dad. What do you mean? My father scowled. However, I stood my ground, undeterred. No matter how intimidating he became, I was no longer afraid. I couldn't stand up to them when I was younger, but things have changed since I became an adult. I could clearly state my position and point out my father's problems. You've always been doing things that deserve criticism, like your gambling addiction. Do you think I haven't noticed? Claire. I think that's a harsh way to put it. I ask for your forgiveness if my tone becomes harsh. When anger surges, it changes how we speak. You can't deny that you're addicted to gambling, can you? That's the reality, right? My father fell silent and looked down. Poker, slots, horse racing, baccarat. He was obsessed with gambling. And he still indulges in it daily. Of course, it's with the money I've earned. Let me be clear. I find this utterly unacceptable. Mom drinks, Dad gambles. After winning the lottery, you lived quite lavishly, huh? As a result, $200,000 disappeared within a few years. I was trying to increase that money, but things didn't go as planned. It's common in investments. If he had actually invested that money in a real business, I could understand. But in my father's case, he just poured the money into his favorite gambling activities. How can that be called an investment? His excuse was so unnatural that I couldn't help but laugh. Sure, many investments have elements of gambling, but what you did was clearly gambling, right? That's not called investment. Please stop twisting the words around. Claire, you're too harsh. Why do you speak so arrogantly to your parents? Haven't you forgotten who raised you? Can we drop the pretense of gratitude? I've never felt grateful for having you as parents. Let me be clear, normal parents don't send their child out in the middle of the night to rummage through garbage bins. You are far dirtier than any trash can. Please be more reserved. One should consider who really needs to be more reserved. My father still has a huge amount of debt, and I am paying it back with the money I earn. Despite depending on me, does he still think he has the right to act arrogantly? My father's once held respect has long been lost, and there's no need for him to act like a father now. My foolish father thinks that being forceful will make me comply. I had prepared a decisive move against him. It seemed the time had come to play that card. I contacted him on my smartphone, and he soon arrived. It appears he had been waiting nearby. A man who knows how to handle such situations. As my father realized who he was, he visibly paled. Mr. Johnson, why are you here? Your daughter contacted me. She said there's something to discuss regarding your debts. I had investigated my father's surroundings and found out where he was borrowing money from. Indeed, since his youth, my father felt a great indebtedness to Mr. Johnson. I learned that my mother's introduction to my father was also facilitated by Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson has reduced a certain amount of my father's debt and keeps him under constant surveillance. Occasionally, when in financial trouble, my father contacts Mr. Johnson for additional loans. Mr. Johnson is essentially mafia, holding a significant position in the organization he belongs to. I was surprised to hear from your daughter. George, you're using your daughter's earnings for repayment? That's hard to believe. No, that's not true. There should be no difference. My father has no income. My father wasted the money he won in the lottery. Since then, he has relied on Mr. Johnson to continue gambling. Perhaps he couldn't forget the affluent lifestyle he once had. In the end, he gambles away his money and repays his debts little by little with his daughter's income, leading a pitiful daily life. My father might have used up a lifetime's worth of luck when he won the lottery. That's what I think. I lend money to many people, but repaying using your daughter's earnings is quite despicable. I rarely hear such stories. Shame on you. I'm sorry. You're apologizing to the wrong person. You should first apologize to your daughter. That's the proper course, isn't it? Apologize for the trouble you've caused and tell her that from now on, you will settle your own debts. But, well, don't make excuses. Mr. Johnson shouted. Both my parents were completely overwhelmed and shrank back. Next, Mr. Johnson lectured my father about parental responsibilities. My father, in tears, looked utterly disgraceful. This should ensure that my father no longer uses my funds for debt repayment. Next, it was time for my mother to face consequences. I had previously contacted another person to come. After Mr. Johnson, Kathy appeared. That kind social worker, Kathy. Both my parents greeted her politely. I meet with her occasionally, but for my parents, it was a reunion after a long time. With her unchanged demeanor, Kathy greeted them with her usual calm smile. I came here today at Claire's request. Both of you, did you really say it doesn't matter if she collapses from overwork because she's not your real child? First, please tell me the truth about that. My parents were at a loss for words. They couldn't provide a clear answer. It was evident from their demeanor that they were aware their statements had been a mistake. Kathy sighed, visibly making a judgment based on their reactions. It's truly unforgivable. To be clear, you're terrible. I felt it when Claire was picking up leftovers, but this is utterly merciless. It makes one question your humanity, doesn't it? I'm sorry. If you truly intend to apologize, you should start by formally apologizing to Claire. That's the correct order. Then we can discuss further, right? Although Kathy was calm, her presence was profoundly commanding. Her experience with many troubled families might have been creating this pressure. My parents were completely dominated by Kathy's authoritative presence. They looked like children being scolded. Claire, I'm sorry. We'll try not to cause you any trouble from now on. It would be appreciated if you could do that. I will be leaving home now. From now on, I will not provide any financial support. That's okay with you both, isn't it? My parents reluctantly nodded. Kathy smiled kindly at me. With this, I finally achieved my own freedom. I was now liberated from any financial exploitation by my so-called parents. Kathy and I left my parents at the table, settled the bill, and exited the establishment. My parents asked for my contact information, but I decided to ignore the request. Later, I heard that each of them found jobs. My father was working in security, and my mother was employed as a part-time worker. If their monthly expenses were limited to living costs and debt repayment, their incomes should be sufficient. However, about a year after I left home, their financial situation collapsed. What was the reason? Mr. Johnson explained the background over the phone. It seems that George has taken on a large debt again. He was instigated by a gambling friend. He's struggling to make payments and is seeking help everywhere. He might even contact you, so be careful. Yes, I understand. Thank you. A few days later, Mr. Johnson's warning became a reality. I received a call from my parents. "Claire, I'm really sorry. I didn't intend to contact you. Did you incur another large debt?" I heard from Mr. Johnson. "Just to be clear, I won't lend you any more money." "Ah, please help me. I have no one else but Claire to turn to. This is really the last time." Why should I believe those words? Words from them trying to use me? Absolutely not. No matter what, I firmly and coldly refused. Ultimately, we parted on bad terms, but I have no regrets. If it means I can completely cut ties with such parents, nothing could be better. I felt that way. Later, I heard from Mr. Johnson that both my parents had moved to the north. They sold everything they could and abandoned the house, moving away from the urban area. I learned about their whereabouts from Mr. Johnson. He laughed about it. No matter where they hide, it's useless. They really are pitiable people. If they contact you, let me know right away. I'll handle it before any trouble comes your way. Yes, that helps a lot. I'll definitely contact you if anything happens. Fortunately, I haven't met Mr. Johnson since then. I haven't received any contact from my parents either, and no problems have occurred. I hope these peaceful days continue. I want to avoid any further dealings with my troubled parents or the loan industry. Mr. Johnson not contacting me is probably out of consideration for me. I still keep in touch with Kathy, the social worker. Recently, Kathy introduced me to a very attractive man. He is a distant relative of hers and runs his own business, and we are the same age. I showed him some of my artwork, and he liked it very much. He wants to display one of my pieces in his office, and we are currently making arrangements for that. We are planning to go on a date at an art museum soon. I went to tell Kathy about this to prepare. It's great that things are working out between you two. I'm glad I introduced him. Let me know if there are any new developments. Thank you, Kathy. I'm always grateful for your support. I don't even know how to properly thank you. Don't worry about it. I love helping. It makes me happy to see you smile, Claire. Days of struggling because of troublesome parents. Searching for leftovers and living in a cluttered house was really hard. But now I am surrounded by trustworthy people. I've had the chance to meet someone of interest. Life has plenty of hardships, but it is not worthless. Believing that, I intend to continue living positively, valuing my individuality,